Now we're going to talk to filmmaker Alicia Sams. She directed, along with Amy Rice, a movie called By the People, the election of Barack Obama, where they went and tracked Barack Obama even before the election and through the election. It's a really interesting movie in that sense. Alicia, welcome to the Young Turks.
Thank you.
So tell us how this got started in the first place.
Well, Amy, it was Amy's idea. She was watching the 2004 convention speech and had the sort of inspiration to think that Barack Obama would be a great subject for a documentary. I watched the speech as well and didn't think instantly, oh, I should make a documentary about this guy. But luckily I was smart enough to recognize a good idea. So she tried for a while to get it off the ground, and then came to me and Edward Norton's company, and we worked on a proposal together, and Edward got us in the door, and we sort of started out by saying, let's just see how this goes. You know, we're interested in his career as a senator. Let's start shooting, see how you like us, kind of, and it became kind of it snowballed very quickly from there.
And how did you wind up getting permission from Obama to shoot all this?
Well, I think the key was that we started early. So our first day of shooting was in May of 2006. And then we went to Africa with him that August. And we figured that, you know, if we were going to spend 2 weeks, we'd come back either, you know, being accepted by them as like people that were going to stick around for a while, or we'd all hate each other and we'd all walk away. And we had a great time on the trip, and that fall he kind of swung into his book tour for Audacity of Hope, and we just kept showing up. And then when the campaign started, Axelrod and Pluff were like, I don't know about these girls. I don't think we want to do this.
And how did you get beyond that?
Well, that was kind of we did have to keep showing up, and we just were really persistent with them, and Edward got on the phone and called Axelrod, and finally one day we sort of convinced Axelrod to do an interview, and we were wiring him up, and he sort of said, you know, how did I get here? What am I doing? But at the end of the interview, he said to us, you know, it was actually really good to sit back and reflect. And I think that then he saw the value of having someone around just documenting this for historical purposes. And by then, too, we'd sort of convinced him that we weren't the press. We weren't going to release anything until after the campaign was over. We also weren't interested in making a film for the campaign, you know, during the campaign. So they kind of respected our integrity by that point and let us keep going.
But, you know, what I'm most curious about, Alicia, is how you first got in the door. Because if I go now and I say to any senator, because back then he was just a senator, right? Mm-hmm. And I go, hey, Senator Baucus, I'd love to do a documentary on you. And boy, would I. But it wouldn't come out like your documentary. How do I get him to say yes? You know,
our pitch was kind of designed around what we were inspired by and interested in was his kind of call to young Americans, and Americans of, you know, not just young Americans, to sort of rededicate themselves to the idea of citizenship. And he was galvanizing people even before he ran and sort of saying, take responsibility for democracy. You know, it's yours for the taking. So what we said we wanted to do was sort of chart his education as a senator, his rise, but we were really interested in kind of the impact that he might have on the American people. And so he became sort of a prism to look at where we were as a country, and it was less, you know, Barack Obama, we want to follow your every move, and more kind of, you know, you're an interesting guy at an interesting time. And so
I'm sorry, I'm going to keep it real. Did sorry for interrupting.
No, that's
I'm
okay.
Not sorry for keeping it real. That's what we do. Did the fact that the movie was produced by Ed Norton wind up helping?
It helped us get in the door for sure, but I think once we got in the door, you know, Amy and I were the only ones shooting it, so we kind of had to prove ourselves. But
right.
That definitely, because Edward was meeting on the Hill for the Enterprise Foundation, you know, and had a way in to the office that was legitimate.
Right.
That got us in there.
That makes sense. We're talking to filmmaker Alicia Sams. She's one of the directors of By the People, the election of Barack Obama. It's a documentary that just debuted on HBO, so you can check it out on HBO. Alicia, the other part that I wanted to ask you about is something that I've been talking about on the show, and then Bill Maher mentioned it, Arianna Huffington mentioned it. You know, looking back a year now since the election, you know, when we see things like your documentary, it's almost a little depressing because everybody's so pumped up, and it looks like he's for the people, by the people, etc. And now that he's in office, you could drive a Mack truck through the loopholes in his financial reform, and so it looks like the bankers are winning. Do you have any sense of that, or did you get that from anybody else, or are we alone on that one?
No, I mean, I think people a year later, people are you know, it's a very different reality being president from running for president. So in a way, I think it's going to be interesting to see this film now. I think it's going to be interesting to see this film in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, because what we tried to do was capture the spirit of that time and that campaign. And what was important to us in that campaign was the grassroots involvement of people. And I think that if people, people are disappointed, if people are happy, however they feel, I hope that this film kind of shows them that it's not enough just to get someone elected. You still have to work for whatever it is that you want, or whatever, and it's a lot harder, working to impact government than it is working to elect somebody. But
that's so true, because that leads me to a quote from David Axelrod from you guys. Mm-hmm. He says, quote, "I think if we're in a close race, these kids, they're going to win it for us. They think they're changing the world, and that's the best thing that they could do." Mm-hmm. And I thought it was curious that he said that they think they're changing the world. And that leads to the question of, do you know if Axelrod or Obama have now gone back and watched this documentary? Because I wonder what their reaction would be, because I don't see them listening to the kids anymore.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much I'm not in there now, so I don't know. I'm only viewing it sort of through the eyes of the press. I don't know how much the kids are speaking up or are involved.
And by the way, I should just, again, sorry for the interruption. When I say kids, I don't mean, are they asking, junior high kids, hey, what should we do in the White House? I mean the people who elected them, the young voters who had that energy that convinced their parents, et cetera, that they could get real change.
Right.
So that's why I'm wondering if they see a documentary like this, they go, oh, yeah. Or are they like, yeah, right, and they thought they were getting changed. That was funny.
Well, but we watched it with a bunch of the staffers at a watch party last week, and it's interesting to just, like, a lot of these kids that were organizers in Iowa and stuff, they're working in various departments, and they actually feel like they, it's incremental and it's small, but they do, they're not involved in solving the financial crisis, but they are involved in the education program or in the Department of Energy, and so I think they feel like they're still fighting the good fight. Mm-hmm. I'm not an economist. I can't analyze that. And I don't think I don't know, what the real story is. But I do think that at least some of them are still engaged and still, it hasn't been that long.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you. And, we talk about it on the show all the time. There are things to be said for what he's gotten accomplished so far and what he's fighting for. And, the jury's still out. So I don't want to be overly pessimistic. And it's just the financial reform is so important, and the guys on the other side are so powerful, and they seem to, they still seem to be in charge. But those are my complaints, and maybe it's going to take a little longer. But I think either way, getting a look at what the campaign was like is instructive. So that's why I think the movie is a real interesting movie. It's called By the People, The Election of Barack Obama. Alicia Sams, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can't get enough of the Young Turks? Well, then subscribe to the TYT's YouTube channel. What's the matter with you?